Greetings, everyone. Okay. So I told y'all I was going to be back relatively quick. So, greetings, family. This is Cassandra Floyd, also known as the Daughter of the Fates, founder of the Temple of Evolutionary Emergence. And we're going to get started with the reading of, let's see here, let's do this. The reading of Beyond God the Father and Toward a Philosophy of Women's Liberation by Mary Daly. Here's looking crazy. Yes. Let's see here. That I'm gonna do an IG live for a change, which I haven't done in a long time. Let's see. Story, real, live. Okay. All right. Let's see here. All right. Works. Perfect. Okay. All right, Miss Carrie. Okay, so for IG, thank you for tuning in. This is Cassandra Floyd, also known as the Daughter of the Fates, founder of the Temple of Evolutionary Emergence. We are going to continue with the reading of Beyond God the Father and Toward a Philosophy of Women's Liberation by Mary Daly. I'm not going to do too much of an intro because I still have yet another live to do this evening at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm going to be doing a live this evening that is going to be a little longer. Today, the reading is only going to be for 1 hour. And then at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I'm going to be doing a live entitled Women of Color, Stop Casting Spells on Your Daughters. This is not going to be for the faint of heart or those who are easily offended or be in your feelings. If you're sensitive, you might want to sit this one out. The live tonight at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time is going to be entitled Women of Color, Stop Casting Spells on Your Daughters. So we're going to be going over some different books on the topic, or that at least address the topic in the books. And so, look forward to that. Right now, again, for those who are just coming in, I am going to be doing a 1 hour read from Beyond God the Father and Toward a Philosophy of Women's Liberation by Mary Daly. For those of you who have been following along, we are starting at the bottom, the last paragraph on page 62, the section entitled Destroying the Victim, From Witch Burning to Lobotomy. For those of you who don't know, let me just say, this book was written in 1973 by the author Mary Daly, who in short was an active participant in and thinker of the second wave of feminism in the early 1970s. And her entry into the feminist movement was one of a woman who grew up, born and raised a devout Roman Catholic, who in turn went to seminary school to get her PhD in Catholicism, or Catholic theology. And as a consequence of what she learned in school, became a radical feminist of the 1970s. So anyway, this is the second book that we've read by her. The first book was entitled Pure Lust. And if you are interested in that book, which was awesome and a game changer, then just go into my folder in my YouTube channel that is entitled Pure Lust by Mary Daly. Okay, so for those of you who've been walking along with me in the read of this book, we're on page 62. Women as a caste, then, are Eve and are punished by a cohesive set of laws, customs, and social arrangements that enforce all pervasive double standards. However, given the ambiguous identification of men with their own women who are kept in a state of powerlessness, the myth of feminine evil cannot be lived out to its completely logical conclusion, which would be total destruction. Society, as we know it, fears and tries to destroy the other. In the case of the Jews in Nazi Germany, these dynamics were worked out to the logical final solution in an effort to complete extermination. And the final solution in an effort at complete extermination. In the case of women, while all are mutilated outrageously, the privilege of complete destruction is reversed for a segment of the female population who are called upon to bear the brunt of a wholly consistent logic. This has been the case with poor and ignorant women under the prevailing legal system who, driven by the total situation of their lives into the condition of unwanted or literally unbearable pregnancy, have died from the barbarities of back alley abortions or desperate attempts at self-abortion or in childbirth or from pregnancy-related disabilities. A most striking example of the selective total destruction of a large number of women was the torturing and burning of women condemned by the church as witches. The most important medieval work on the subject, the Malleus Maleficarum, written by two Dominican priests, Springer and Kramer, in the 15th century, proclaims that, quote, "It is women who are chiefly addicted to evil superstitions," end quote. This is, after all, only to be expected after, quote, "all witchcraft comes from carnal lust, which is in women insatiable," end quote. According to the authors, men are protected from such a horrible crime because Jesus was a man. Unlike the mythical Eve, the witches were real living persons condemned by the church's hierarchy, which was threatened by their power. Indeed, quote, "power" is a key word in understanding why some or not others were selected for this horrible fate. The authors of the Malleus Maleficarum asserted that among women, midwives surpass all others in wickedness. Oh. As Meccalet points out, there is reason to believe that women who were midwives and who healed were greatly feared by the church, for their power threatened the supremacy of the clerics. Scholars such as Margaret A. Murray point out that in examining the records of the witches, we were dealing with the remains of a pagan religion that Christianity was determined to stamp out. Scholars estimate of the number of witches who were burned very greatly, from 30,000 to several million. Given the inadequacy of the records, it is impossible to demand accuracy. Despite the statements of Springer and Kramer, it is certain that there were also male witches, that is, adherents of the old religion. However, it is also clear that women were special targets of the church's hatred. It is certain that the frenzy of the struggle against witchcraft began to grow in intensity in the 15th century and petered out early in the 18th century. We also know that the methodology of witch hunting had a basic premise, though not always admitted in these terms, that the person accused could not win. At one test was to fling the accused bound into water, for a witch, having denied her baptism, would in turn be repelled by the water, so she would float and not sink into it. If she was innocent, she would sink. Clearly, the test took care of the accused, one way or the other. Another infallible sign of guilt was the witch's inability to shed tears during torture and before the judges. The historian Henry Charles Leah tells us, quote, In such a case, the inquisitor was instructed to adjure her to weep by the loving tears shed for the world by Christ on the cross. But the more she adjured, we are told, the drier she would become. Still, with the usual logic of the demonologist, if she did weep, it was a device of the devil and was not to be reckoned in her favor. End quote. The role of witch, then, was often ascribed to social deviants whose power was feared. I'm going to read that sentence again. The role of witch, then, was often ascribed to social deviants whose power was feared. All women are... Let's see. All women are deviants from the male norm of humanity, a point emphasized by the misbegotten male theory of Aristotle and Aquinas, and the penis envy dogma of the Freudians and other psychological theories, such as the inner space doctrine of Erikson and the anima theory of Jung. However, those singled out as witches were frequently characterized by the fact that they had or were believed to have power arising from a particular kind of knowledge, as in the case of wise women who knew the curative powers of herbs and to whom people went to for counsel and help. Defined as evil, they became the scapegoats of society. And in this process, the dominant ethos was reinforced. The inquisitor functioned as the protector. The inquisitor functioned as the protector of society against deviance, against deviant behavior. Against deviant behavior, which was threatening because powerful. In modern times, psychiatric ideology has to a large extent replaced theology as custodian of society's values. Okay? Shit. Clearly, the semantics of, quote, good and evil have been replaced partially by health and mental illness. In our terms, a woman who is defined as unhealthy because she wants power over her own life can't win according to the rules of the psychiatrist's games. As Cazaz has shown, the tortures are more subtle, but the pattern is the same. Cazaz's analysis is a development of an analogy between institutional psychiatry and the Inquisition, which was earlier made by Elizabeth Packard, a woman who was psychiatrically imprisoned for madness in the 19th century by her husband, who disagreed with her theological views. Women particularly, although of course not exclusively, are victimized by the barbarities of modern psychiatry, especially psychosurgery. As a result of the efforts of Dr. Peter Bregin's investigations, it is now well known that there has emerged a second wave of psychosurgery, which, interestingly, is contemporaneous with the second wave of feminism. This excludes operations in which healthy brain tissue is mutilated in order to change a person's emotions and conduct. This includes operation in which healthy brain tissue is mutilated in order to change a person's emotions and conduct. The current wave of psychosurgery is aimed not only at state hospital patients, but especially at relatively well-functioning neurotics, particularly women. On February 24th of 1972, Dr. Bregin's article, quote, "The Return of Lobotomy in Psychosurgery," was read into the congressional record. Discussing the remarkably large proportion of women who were being lobotomized, Dr. Bringett explains that it is more socially acceptable to lobotomize women because creativity, which the operation totally destroys, is in this society, quote, an expendable quality in women. Oh my God. Oh, you. Mm, 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 mm. Creativity is an expendable quality in women. A famous psychosurgeon, Freeman, and the dean of lobotomists, is quoted as saying that lobotomized women make good housekeepers. Ugh. Concerning this phenomenon, Dr. Barbara Roberts, a feminist, observes the psychosocial conditioning is no longer as effective as it once was in suppressing female anger. Quote, but ever resourceful patriarchal class society is developing what could prove to be the final solution to the woman problem and for the problems caused by all other oppressed groups. That weapon is psychosurgery. The weapons, and it's important to mention, even though this book was written in 1973, that it is important to mention that they did not stop performing frontal lobotomies until 1975. 1975 was when they started digging into people's brains to remove a part of their cerebral cortex as psychotherapy. The weapons that modern technology is developing for social control of deviants, particularly women, are more subtle than burning at the stake. They merely destroy minds, the capacity for creativity, imagination, and rebellion, while leaving hands and uteruses intact to perform the services of manual work and breeding. Oh, damn. Beyond, this is the next section. We're on the bottom of page 65. Beyond good and evil. The beginning of liberation comes when women refuse to be good and or healthy by prevailing standards. To be female is to be a deviant by definition in the prevailing culture. Come on, Mary. Come on, Mary. Come on, Mary. Come on, Mary. Damn. I had this conversation with this woman yesterday, this acquaintance yesterday, who asked me the question, um, why do I encourage people to sin for salvation? Y'all know I'll be talking about sinning for salvation, right? Or to sin on purpose, right? Or whatever. And she was like, maybe you can say it in a different way. Like maybe you can say it in a way that's not so, I get what you mean, but like maybe you can say it in a way that's not so off-putting to the general population. Like maybe you can say it in a way and then explain it later. And I was like, that's not what my intention is. My intention is not to win the general population. My intention is to stage a fucking contest with the opposition. My intention is to stage a contest with patriarchy. And that is to be direct. That is to be forceful. That is to be offending. And she refused to get it. It wasn't that she didn't understand. She refused to get it, but then wanted to stage a contest with me about why that was my position and why I was unwilling to tailor my position. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know we create things. I know it's your church, it's your thing, but maybe sometimes we just be in our feelings about what we create. And so we be unwilling to hear other people. The fuck? No. I said exactly what I said. Well studied, well researched in why I took the position. I'm in my feelings. Maybe it's my ego. Child. The beginning of liberation comes when women refuse to be good and or healthy by prevailing standards. To be female in a patriarchy is to be a deviant by definition in the prevailing culture. To be female and defiant is to be intolerably deviant. Intolerably deviant. Come on, Mary. Come on, Mary. Child, if this woman, this sister on IG, I watched this video about 30 times. She said, look, if you ain't black and you ain't got a loud black woman in your circle ain't as revolutionary as you think it is. Your circle ain't as progressive as you think it is. If you ain't got at least one loud black woman in your space, your shit ain't revolutionary. Your shit ain't progressive. You got somebody in your circle who is keeping the peace, who is making you comfortable. You understand? Mary said, look, to be female is to be born a deviant. Didn't she say that? What did she say the original sin was in pure lust? To be born she. To be born female. That's what it is. That's what to sin means. To sin means the original sin is to be born she. You feel me? She said, look, to be female and defiant is to be intolerably deviant. This means going beyond the imposed definitions of bad women or bad woman and good woman, beyond the categories of prostitute and wife. This is equivalent to assuming the role of witch and mad woman. Come on. Come on in. Come on in. Come on in. She said this is the equivalent to assuming the role of witch and mad woman. Though this might be suicidal if attempted in isolation, not less self-destructive, however, than attempting to live within the accepted categories. When done in sisterhood, it amounts to a collective repudiation of the scapegoat syndrome. It is then tantamount to a declaration of identity beyond the good and evil of patriarchy's world and beyond sanity and insanity. Come on in the motherfucking room. Okay? Come on in the room. It cannot be claimed that such a declaration of identity will cause the mystery of evil to disappear automatically from human existence. What it amounts to, however, is a massive exorcism. Repudiation of the scapegoat role and of the myth of the fall by the primordial scapegoats may be the dawn of real confrontation with the mystery of evil. Margaret Murray pointed out that the word witch is allied with wit, basically meaning to know. The witch's knowledge has always been that of one who foretells. In addition, Murray indicated that when this is done in the name of one of the established religions, it is called prophecy. But when divination is done in the name of a pagan god, it is called mere witchcraft. This kind of prophetic knowing is characteristic of the women's movement. This knowledge that women are now acquiring is an experiential knowledge that drives beyond the insane goodness of the victimized honest matron or respectable suburban housewife or docile nun. It also drives beyond the projected wickedness of the equally victimized whore whose options have been so few that the evil is less a choice than a forced limitation. This knowledge that drives beyond the unreal goodness and wickedness imposed upon women is both experiential and reflective. It is not reducible to knowing only in the sense of sexual experience. It is rather a knowing that comes with discovery of the self's potential in all areas of endeavor in a way that has been denied to women not only by external not only by external deterrents, such as restrictive laws and rules, but also by internal deterrents, which are the result of upbringing. It brings with it an ability to assess and evaluate experiences independently of and in the face of the culture's imposed valuation. It is therefore prophetic knowledge pointing beyond things as they are. In going beyond the imposed innocence, which both the good woman and the bad woman have in common, the lack of valuation and the choice of identity by the self, women are gaining the psychological freedom required to challenge the destructive false innocence that is characteristic of our age. Albert Camus wrote of the contrast between the unabashed and the honest crimes of earlier times and the hypocrisy of our age. Quote, but slave camps under the flag of freedom, massacres justified by philanthropy or by the taste of the superhuman, in one sense, cripple judgment. On the day when crime dons the apparel of innocence through a curious transposition characteristic of our times, it is innocence that is called upon to justify itself. Oh my God, come on in the motherfucking room. Oh, she could have wrote that statement, right? Or he could have wrote that statement today. It is innocence that is required in a sea of madness. It is innocence that is required to justify itself. This innocence is characteristic of the phallic morality that identifies good with us and bad with them, particularly when such an attitude is carried to its logical conclusion. It can be seen through when those most victimized by it begin to come of age, that is, to find our integrity beyond such good and evil. Whoo! Come on. This movement beyond patriarchy's good and evil can be seen mythically as the fall, the dreaded fall, which is now finally beginning to occur, in which women are bringing ourselves and then the other half of the species to eat of the forbidden fruit, child, the knowledge refused by patriarchal society. This will be the fall from false innocence into a new kind of adulthood. Unlike the old adulthood that required the arresting of growth, this demands a growing that is ever continuing and never completed. Yes. In writing this way, I am tearing the image of the fall from its context in patriarchal religion. I have suggested that the original myth revealed the essential defect or sin of the patriarchal religion, its justifying of sexual caste. I am now suggesting that there were limitations in the original myth, not consciously intended, of the dreaded future. That is, one can see the myth as prophetic of the real fall that was yet on its way, dimly glimpsed. In that dreaded event, women reach for knowledge and, finding it, share it with men. Listen, share it with men so that together we can leave the delusory paradise of false consciousness and alienation. In ripping the image of the fall from its old context, we are also transvaluating it. That is, its meaning is divested of its negativity and becomes positive and healing. Rather than a fall from the sacred, the fall now initiated by women becomes a fall into the sacred and therefore into freedom. Mircea Eliade, at the close of his book, The Sacred and the Profane, suggests that in the modern mind, religion and mythology have been eclipsed in the darkness of the unconscious. Quote, or from the Christian point of view, it could also be said that the non-religion is equivalent to a new fall of man, end quote. I am proposing a different interpretation of the contemporary situation, arising from the new women's experience of liberation. That is, if the symbols and myths of patriarchal religion are dying, that is this is hardly a total tragedy, since they have perpetuated oppression. Damn, it's hot. Since they have perpetuated oppression. To the extent that they have done this, they have represented a pseudo sense of the sacred. The fall, beyond the false dichotomy between good and evil, has the potential to bring us away not only from the false paradise of the pseudo sacred symbols of patriarchy, but also from the banal non-religious consciousness that Eliade deplores. It can bring us into a new meeting with the sacred. In his insightful foreword to Montague Summers' The History of Witchcraft, Felix Morrow points out that Summers' justifications of the church's persecution of the witches spring from a concept of the supernatural in which God is inconceivable without the devil. The fall from this schizoid image of the supernatural can come when women refuse the schizoid identity foisted upon us. As we overthrow the unreal good and evil projected upon us, we will be overthrowing the unreally good God, whose existence requires an incarnate devil to be persecuted and to do the persecuting. In a real sense, the symbols of patriarchal religion deserved to die. What women's becoming can mean in something beyond their death and beyond their What women's becoming can mean is something beyond their death and beyond their rebirth. It is not a mere cyclic return and resurrection of the sacred into profane consciousness that is at stake. Rather, women's becoming is something more like a new creation altogether. As I will attempt to show in the next chapter, it can mean the arrival of a whole new being. Woo! Oh my God. Y'all. Now this is the Mary we accustomed to. God damn it. Woo-wee. Let's see. Okay. Chapter 3. Beyond christolatry, a world without models. Quote, take the snake, the fruit tree, and the woman from the tableau, and we have no fall, no frowning judge, no inferno, no everlasting punishment, hence no need of a savior. Thus, the bottom falls out of the whole Christian theology. Here is the reason why in all the biblical researches and higher criticisms, the scholars never touch the position of women. What? That is a quote by Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Quote, historical Christianity has fallen into the error that corrupts all attempts to communicate religion. It dwells with noxious exaggeration about the person of Jesus. Ralph Waldo Emerson. The distortion in Christian ideology resulting from and confirming sexual hierarchy is manifested not only in the doctrines of God and of the fall, but also in doctrines concerning Jesus. A great deal of Christian doctrine has been docetic. That is, it has not seriously accepted the fact that Jesus was a limited human being. A logical consequence of the liberation of women will be a loss of plausibility of Christological formulas which reflect and encourage idolatry in relation to the person of Jesus. As the idolatry and the dehumanizing effects of reifying and therefore limiting God become more manifest in women's expanded consciousness, it will become less plausible to think of Jesus as the second person of the Trinity who assumed a human nature in a unique hypostatic union. Indeed, it is logical that the prevalent emphasis upon the total uniqueness and supereminence of Jesus will become less meaningful. To say that it is not at all to deny the charismatic and revelatory power of the personality of Jesus or of other persons, or of other persons. The point is, rather, to attempt a realistic assessment of traditional ways of looking at and using his image. It is still not unusual for Christian priests and ministers, when confronted with the issue of women's liberation, to assert that God became incarnate uniquely as a male, and then to draw arguments for male supremacy from this. Indeed, the Christological tradition itself tends to justify such conclusions. The underlying and often explicit assumptions in the minds of theologians down through the centuries has been that the divinity could not have deigned to become incarnate in the inferior sex, and the fact that he did not do so, of course, confirms male superiority. The erosion of consent to male dominance on the part of women is undermining such assumptions of the tradition. It might indeed seem logical that the widely publicized phenomenon of the death of God would have entailed also a death of Jesus in the 20th century, at least in the sense of transcending the Christian fixation upon the person of Jesus. Obviously, this did not happen within the mindset of such Christologically oriented thinkers as Bultmann, Barth, Brunner, Reinhold Niebuhr, and Bonhoeffer. Even so, universalist, a theologian of the past generation as Tillich, who seemingly was profoundly in accord with Nietzsche's proclamation of God's death, found it necessary to write, quote, "The ultimate concern of the Christian is not Jesus, but the Jesus Christ who is manifest as the crucified," end quote. A young Black theologian, Henry Nicholson, in his book, Jesus is Dead, pointedly asks, quote, "Why does ultimate concern, which Tillich described as faith, have to be concerned with accepting Jesus at all, crucified or not?" End quote. It is not necessary to look to the past generation of theologians to see that the almost universal pervasiveness of this fixation upon Jesus and the seemingly compulsive need to baptize and legitimate religious thinking, even of the most radical type, as Christian. The attitude is almost all pervasive in seminaries and theological schools, and certainly among those undertaking to write theology. Among the more colorful manifestations of this phenomenon is the work of Thomas J.J. Althusser, who, as a radical death of God theologian, proposed a gospel of Christian atheism. For Althusser and many others less forthright in expressing their views, God is dead, but Jesus is alive. I am proposing that Christian idolatry concerning the person of Jesus is not likely to be overcome except through the revolution that is going on in women's consciousness. Y'all didn't hear. Damn. Listen what she said, y'all. I am proposing that Christian idolatry concerning the person of Jesus is not likely to be overcome except through the revolution that is going on in women's consciousness. It will, I think, become increasingly evident that exclusively masculine symbols for the ideal of incarnation or for the ideal of the human search for fulfillment will not do. Okay, I will repeat that. Claudia Ancra says, Mary sometimes goes over my head. I'm going to start back at the beginning of the paragraph. And y'all walk with me. I am proposing that Christian idolatry concerning the person of Jesus is not likely to become except through the revolution that is going on in women's consciousness. What she just said? She said the only way, quote, God will truly be dead is through the women's liberation movement. That's what she said. That's what she said. She said Jesus ain't going nowhere as long as women are not staging a contest. That's what she said. She said, "Oop is right." That's what she said. I am proposing that Christian idolatry concerning the person of Jesus is not likely to be overcome except through the revolution that is going on in women's consciousness. It will, I think, become increasingly evident that the ideal of the human search for fulfillment will not do. She said the ideal of incarnation, child, will not do. As a uniquely masculine image and language for divinity loses credibility, so also the idea of a single divine incarnation in a human being of the male sex may give way in the religious consciousness to an increased awareness of the power of being in all persons. Seeds of this awareness are already present in the traditional doctrine that all human beings are made to the image of God, and in a less than adequate way in the doctrine of grace. Now it should become possible to work out with increasing realism the implications in both of these doctrines that human beings are called to self-actualization and to the creation of a community that fosters becoming of women and men. This means that no adequate models can be taken from the past. Yo. Come on. Woo. She said no adequate models can be taken from the past. Let me just digress for a minute, y'all. What does she mean when she say no adequate models can be taken from the past? What does she say? For what? For what? For self-actualization. For what? For what does she say? Where is that right here? Where is that? For the human search for fulfillment, for the need for the call of human beings to be self-actualized, for the creation of a community that fosters the becoming of women and men. She said, for all these things, this means no adequate models can be taken from the past. Ooh, what does that mean? What am I talking to y'all all about all the time? Remember that piece that I did about a year and a half ago when the Dalai Lama transgressed against that baby and everybody was taking the Dalai Lama side? Remember what I called that shit? No more gurus, no more shamans, no more priests, no more preachers, no more male deities, no more male leadership. That's what I said. That's what I said. Here she say in 1973, if you want to be fully self-actualized as a man or a woman, if you want to if you want to fulfill to engage in the human search for fulfillment, if you want to achieve increased awareness of self and of being in every person, if you want to achieve self-actualization and participate in the creation of a community that fosters the becoming of both men and women to their full potential self, there are no adequate models of the past. We can't take no models from the past. What Tajali say? No Buddha, no Krishna, no Muhammad, no Yahweh, no Jesus, no none of them. No, none of them. She said this revolutionary leap forward into full human realized potential is being waged in the consciousness of women. And everybody will fall in line. Everybody follow suit. She said this means there are no adequate models that can be taken from the past if we are to evolve. It may be that we will witness a re-mythologizing of religion. Symbolism for incarnation of the divine in human beings may continue to be needed in the future, but it is highly unlikely that women or men will continue to find plausible that symbolism which is epitomized in the image of the Virgin kneeling in adoration before her own son. Yo. Yo. Let me read that shit again. She says, it may be that we will witness a remythologizing of religion. Symbolism for incarnation of the divine in human beings may continue to be needed in the future, but it is highly unlikely that women or men will continue to find plausible that symbolism which is epitomized in the image of the great virgin kneeling in adoration before her own son. Perhaps this will be replaced by the emergence of imagery that is not hierarchical. The point is not to deny that a revelatory event took place in the encounter with the person Jesus. Rather, it is to affirm that the creative presence of the verb can be revealed at every historical moment in every person and every culture. New being. Since the mystery of evil has been dislocated in patriarchal religious consciousness, it is logical to ask whether the Christian ideal of salvation suffers from a comparable and consequent dislocation. The idea of a unique male savior may be seen as one more legitimation of male superiority. Indeed, there is reason to see it as a perpetuation of patriarchal religion's quote original sin of servitude to patriarchy itself. To put it rather bluntly, I propose that Christianity itself should be castrated by cutting away the products of super male arrogance. Oh, my God. Oh, Lord. She said, to put it rather bluntly, I propose that Christianity itself should be castrated by cutting away the products of super male arrogance, the myths of sin and salvation that are simply two diverse symptoms of the same disease. Woo! It is evident, I think, that the growing woman consciousness is in conflict with fundamentalist and orthodox doctrines of concerning Jesus. Even Tillich's conception of the Christ as the new being presents the usual enigma of a partial truth. It may be claimed with justification that Tillich's Christology has some advantages. It is to some extent free of the static categories, both of strictly biblical thought or of the Hellenic formulas. It stresses the humanity of Jesus as opposed to a high Christology, and recognizes the Christ as a symbol. However, as in the case of his analysis of the fall, Tillich abstracts from the specific content of the symbol, which in fact functions to justify oppressive societal structures. Once again, there is no notice taken of the fact that the medium, the message. Defenders of this method argue that the symbol, quote, can be used oppressively, or that it, quote, has been used oppressively, but insists that it need not function this way. This kind of defense is understandable, but it leaves a basic question unanswered. If the symbol can be used that way, and in fact has a long history of, quote, being used that way, isn't this an indication of some inherent deficiency in the symbol itself? Come on in the room, y'all, goddamn. It indeed is true that our psyches cry out for new being. However, it is most improbable that under the conditions of patriarchy, a male symbol can function exclusively or adequately as some ambivalence about this. I think rather that the bearers of new being have to be those who live precariously on the boundary of patriarchal space, the primordial aliens, women. The story also the idea of the God man, the God male on the imaginative level, the dogma of the hypostatic union in is beginning to be perceived by some women as a kind of cosmic joke. Natural to speculate that the doctrine of the second coming might be a way to salvage tradition, whether this be conceived as appearing in the form of a woman or a group of potential, let's see, to our human potentiality. While this would appear to have the advantage of maintaining some continuity, acceptance of this kind of language, it would be important to be well aware of what we are about. If it is understood that within a comfortable position for religion is patriarchal. Later in this feminist, but so what? In an admirable oh no. I'm not showing anything weird on my end. Damn. Let's see. Oh, that's interesting. A lot of y'all comments weren't even coming through. I don't know how much y'all heard or if y'all heard anything. God damn it. Let's see. And how many black women are caught up in the church? Because as long as men can see a connectivity problem. Okay, well, I don't know. I don't know. Okay. In an admirable and scholarly article, Leonard Swidler has marshaled historical evidence to show convincingly that Jesus was a feminist. The response that appears to be forthcoming from many women goes something like this. Quote, fine, wonderful, but even if he wasn't, I am, end quote. Professor Swidler's work has the advantages of striving for historical accuracy and of maintaining continuity with tradition. At the same time, there are inherent difficulties in this approach. First, his assumption that one can extract religious truth from time-conditioned categories seems to mean that we can shuck off the debris of a long history of oppressiveness and get to the pristine purity of the original revelation. This is problematic in that it tends to be backward looking, assuming at least implicitly that past history, that is, some peak moments of the past, has some sort of prior claim over present experience, as if recourse to the past were necessary to legitimate experience now. A second difficulty with this Jesus was a feminist approach to feminism is interrelated with the first. Implicit in this approach is the notion that there are adequate models that can be extracted from the past. The traditional idea of imatio Christi is the not so hidden agenda of this message or of this method. In contrast, women have the option of giving priority to what we find valid in our own experience without needing to look to the past for its justification. I suggest that this is the more authentic approach to our problems of identity. Moreover, the contemporary situation has a qualitative newness about it that can be recognized even in abstraction from the insights of feminism. Margaret Mead wrote of this dramatic difference as a new and unique, quote, generation gap. She points out that those born and bred before World War II are immigrants in time. We no longer live in a post-figurative culture in which children can look to their grandparents and parents as models for their own future. What is happening cannot even be described accurately as a co-figurative culture in which the elders are still dominant while the prevailing models for members of society are contemporaries. According to Mead, it is time for asking fuck. According to Mead, it is time for asking wholly new questions for the becoming of a prefigurative culture. She writes, quote, if we are to build a prefigurative culture in which the past is instrumental rather than coercive, we must change the location of the future. So as the young say, the future is now, end quote. Although Mead affirms the need for asking wholly new questions, she herself does not appear to ask or to hear the new questions that radical feminism is raising. However, her recognition that it is time for openness to radical newness is an important insight that we can share. Aside from the impossibility of looking to the past for adequate guidance, I propose that there are inherent difficulties in looking to Jesus or to anyone else as a model. The very concept of model, as commonly understood, is one of those conceptual products that either should be rejected as not applicable to persons, or else made into a new word by being lifted out of its old context. The same term may be retained, materially speaking, but what we are about is breaking models in the old sense of the term. It seems to have been part of the patriarchal mindset to imitate slavishly a master or father figure with an almost blind devotion, and then to reject this figure in order to be oneself. It is perhaps significant that the Latin term modulus or modulus means a small measure. It is necessary to shrink the self in order to imitate a model in this sense. The imitation rejection syndrome is not what is going on with women now. Those who have come far enough in consciousness to break through the destructive conditioning imposed through models offered to the female in our culture are learning to be critical of all ready-made models. This is not to say that strong and free women do not have an influence, but this is transmitted rather as an infectious freedom. Those who are really living on the boundary tend to spark in others the courage to affirm their own unique being. It may be, as Paul Van Buren contends, that Jesus had such an effect upon his followers. The important thing then was the freedom and power of being in which they participated, which enabled them to be their unique selves. The point was not blind imitation of Jesus's actions and views. If reading the Gospels or anything else sparks this kind of freedom in some persons today, this is hardly to be disparaged. But then Jesus or any other liberated person who has this effect functions as a model precisely in the sense of being a model breaker, pointing beyond his or her own limitations to the potential for future liberation. Okay, that's it. That's all the reading I'm gonna do out of there today, because again, I got another live to do at 9 o'clock that I have to be preparing for. So we're ending on page 75. We're going to pick up probably tomorrow or another day, I don't know, with the next section, which is entitled Jesus and the Scapegoat Syndrome. So for those of you who tuned in late and are wondering what I have been reading, the book is called Beyond God the Father and Toward a Philosophy of Women's Liberation by Mary Daly. So we will pick up on that on another day. And I will encourage you to join me tonight at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for the live that I will be doing entitled Women of Color, Stop Casting Spells on Your Daughters. Yes, I know the title is jarring. Yes, I know that you might be timid about participating in this discussion, but this is part and parcel of the process of changing the future, is to address those things that are taboo and deep and sometimes even painful and hurtful, face them head on so that they can be cleared, so that we can adequately move forward. So tonight, the discussion at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on YouTube will be women of color, stop casting spells on your daughters. If you want a reading or to email me or whatever. So Tajali, that's not the discussion. The discussion is very specific. Now, there are other things that I will be discussing later about Black women in their power, about women of color in their power, and the impact that it has on the whole, but that's not the discussion tonight. The discussion tonight is very, very specific. It is about the peculiar relationship of women and their daughters under the patriarchy and the ways that that shows up and how to address it and how to root it out. You feel me? It will apply to other things. So it's worth anybody watching because it will apply in a lot of different areas, but it's specific that we talk about right now. Right. And if you don't have a daughter that you gave birth to, but you have functioned in that role as an auntie, as a surrogate, as, a foster, a stepmom, I'm talking about that too. So those things can apply. Okay. Maybe even as a teacher, if you are a teacher and you got conflict with female students, you probably will gain something from this discussion too. But I am specifically talking about Black women and their girl children. Okay. So that's all I got to say about that. That was the reading, part 11, reading Beyond God the Father. I will post when I let you know when I'm going to be reading from that book again, hopefully sooner than later. And then I'll be back with you this evening for this live. And I will be honest, it's probably going to function as our temple service because tomorrow is a crazily, insanely busy day for me. Sunday is a crazily, insanely busy day for me. So tonight's piece is probably going to be it's probably going to be the temple service for the week. Okay. All right. So I'll see you guys later. This is Cassandra Floyd, also known as the Daughter of the Fates. And I will see you this evening. Take care.